morning. So today we're going to start a new unit. And we've been talking previously about the geography and the Native Americans of North America. So now to those Native Americans, we are going to add into the mix the European explorers. So now we want to look at why those Europeans left Europe and started to explore, looking for land, gold, other riches. Trade routes were very important. But this is US 1.4, if you're following along on your SOLs. And so in your main Schoology page, you've got the study guide for US 1.4, and that's going to help you out here. And this short video is really about the motivations, obstacles, and accomplishments of those European explorers in a brief overview fashion. And then in the next video, we'll look at specific explorers and the specific areas that they explored and claimed for various countries. Okay, so the first thing we want to know is what motivated them to explore. So idea number one was that the great empires of Europe, the countries of Europe, Spain, France, England, they were in competition. They wanted to be the biggest empire in the world. And that had always been a major motivation. And to become a huge empire, it takes certain things, namely money, land, there's conflict and war, but we want to kind of narrow it down to some general categories. Big idea number one, the empires of Europe were in competition with each other. And the first thing was money, economics. They wanted to find the most gold, the most natural resources to increase trade. All of those things are going to make an empire wealthy. And that wealth is important because wealth in and of itself was a competition between empires, but it's also the substance that's going to allow more exploration, more conquest, is simply having the money to do that. Okay? Number two. In those days, religion was very, very important. Nowadays, we talk about, a separation of church and state, but back then there wasn't such a thing. And certain empires had certain religions, and they wanted to spread their religion across the globe. That evangelicism of religion was very, very important. And finally, number three, simply land. To be able to say, my empire is bigger than your empire. That was global bragging rights that these countries were fighting for. All right, so our motivating forces were number one, economic, gold, natural resources, and trade. Economic is just a fancy word for money. Number two, religion, spreading Christianity. Now, England wanted to spread kind of a Protestant version of Christianity, and Spain, for example, wanted to spread Catholicism of Christianity, but they're all Christian religions. So don't think that they're, super, super different. They all want to spread the Christian religion, just which version of it. And finally, number three, competition for empire and the belief that my empire is superior to, is better than your empire. My culture is the one that should be spread across the globe. They all sort of felt that way. So economic, religious, and the superiority of your own culture. All right, so the easy way to remember that, the motivating forces, is remembering the 3 G's: gold, God, and glory. Or as you're filling in your sheet, old, odd, Lori. Okay? Gold, God, and glory were the 3 motivations. And motivations are the reasons why we do things.
This is so sad, I must say.
Now, of course, there were obstacles. Like any goal that you want to achieve, if it's worthwhile and significant, there's going to be things that stand in your way. And these obstacles are the things that stand in the way of global domination, global exploration. So, number one, poor maps and navigational tools. So you can see, before we explore, there's virtually no map. So here would be Europe. And even then, the picture of what Europe looks like globally is pretty distorted. And then over here on the Western Hemisphere, it's mostly blank. People didn't know. When you have a map, imagine going on a family trip and they say, well, we're going to grandma's house. And, the first question that kids always ask on a trip is, are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Well, it's nice to know how long that trip is going to take and where you're going. But imagine being in a car and it might be a week in the car. It might be 6 months in the car. You just don't know. And there's no good way to figure it out. You don't have a map. You can't stop and ask directions. So that was a significant obstacle to exploration when you're trying to sign people up for these voyages and find sailors and crew, and you're going, well, we're going to go out. Where are we going to go? I don't know. How long is it going to take? No idea. It just, was a really was a scary proposition. Number 2, disease, starvation, and ultimately death. When you put these sailors in tiny, tiny spaces of these ships, they were relatively very small. They're not ocean liners like we have today. You put them in tiny space, very close together. Whatever problem one sailor brings quickly spreads to the whole crew. Along with that, the diet that the crew ate was pretty bad. It was a lot of, salt pork and not a lot of fruits and vegetables at all. So starvation was a real thing. And even if you weren't actively starving, diseases like rickets and scurvy, which are diseases caused by vitamin deficiencies, made sailors very sick and would even kill them. So you're on a voyage, and again, back to point 1, if you try to imagine this, you're starving or you're sick and you're out at sea and you're going, I just want to get home. I just want to get to some place where I can get some food. And you have no idea how long that's going to take. That is a daunting proposition. It's not like, okay, we're 3 days from help and we're headed there. We might be 3 days from help. We might be 3 months from help. Very, very daunting proposition. Number 3, fear of the unknown.
I think I need a hug.
There were lots of myths about the earth. They weren't terribly, terribly afraid of sea monsters, though. Whales, giant squid, those were things that they had seen and that really were things that do exist. And so there were myths about sea creatures and, the idea of the earth being flat. Now, we want to be clear on that particular myth was for the most part not true. And we'll talk a little bit in class about why that was. But that's a myth that you don't too much have to worry about, the whole flat earth thing. All right, a lack of adequate supplies. Adequate simply means enough. And like we said, when you're packing for a trip that you don't know how long it's going to take and you don't know where you're going, how do you prepare? And so running out of food and water in the middle of an ocean was really the most pressing concern that these sailors had. You cannot drink salt water for more than a few days before the salt in the salt water starts to dehydrate you even worse. So these things are really big problems. Okay, so these are our obstacles. And if you're filling in your sheet there's what you need to go ahead and fill in, underline for you. Number one, poor maps and navigational tools. Disease, starvation, and death. Number three, they feared the unknown. And number four, there was a lack of adequate, which means enough, supplies, namely food, water, that sort of thing. Okay? And so, even through all of this, the sailors accomplished things. These explorers accomplished, they achieved some of their goals, sometimes by sheer luck, sometimes by will and determination, but they, got to where they wanted to be ultimately. So they left Europe, they came to North America, and really and truly, initially at least, they were trying to get to Asia because of the spices and the silks and the riches of Asia was where they were trying to go. All right. So, number one, our accomplishments. They exchanged goods and ideas. All right. So, goods being products between North America and Europe. Ideas were things like religion. And that's the one thing that really hurts people come quiz and test time because they want to put as a major accomplishment of exploration that they exchanged Christianity, they exchanged religions. That is true that they did that, but that falls under the heading of ideas. Okay, they exchanged goods and ideas. Number two, out of sheer necessity, they improved their navigational tools and ships. And number three, they did claim territories for European countries. And in the next video, that's what we're going to talk about is specifically what countries were claiming what territories. Okay? So, exchange goods and ideas, improve navigational tools and ships, claim territories for European countries are the three accomplishments of exploration. And so next time, we're going to talk about the specific countries that claim specific chunks of land in North America. And I'll see you next time. Thank you.